It's my pleasure to introduce and welcome a few of the suited people up the front. Those of us who, it doesn't matter how warm it is, we put on our suits. And I'd like, of course, to introduce Pastor Terry Johnson, who is the President of the Australian Union Conference. Thank you for being here, Terry. And, of course, Pastor Graham Christian, who is the Victorian Conference President. Thank you for being here today. We've got Brendan Pratt from the Union as well. He's the Ministerial Association Secretary at the Union. And Pastor Craig Gillis, of course, who's our General Secretary at the Victorian Conference. There'll be a short test on this later, by the way. I hope you've been listening. There's a assorted other conference personnel here. I can see you there, Phil, trying to hide. And I see many other pastors, and I know Sylvia's here from the Union as well. All of which is to say that, Steve, we're here for you. We're here to support you today. And this, I think, shows the gravity and the importance with which we take what we're about to do. So I want to say thank you for inviting me along as well. My name is Justin Bone. I'm the Victorian Conference Ministerial Association Secretary. You get used to saying those after a while. I'm also privileged to be down to talk a little bit about Steve and his ministry history. And I'm very grateful to be able to do that. I was Steve's intern mentor for his second year of internship. And I've known him for several years, not as long as most of you fine folk. But in all that time, I've been very impressed with Steve. And I'm very grateful just to know you as a person, Steve. Steve grew up in an Adventist household. His father, a lecturer and a pastor, still is a pastor. There we are. How are you, sir? I didn't even introduce your father, Steve. We can do that later. Thank you for coming all this way. So Steve grew up as a pastor's kid with all that entails, right? Early in childhood, when Steve's mother thought she might even lose him, she prayed, "If you let my son live, God, I dedicate him to you." And as you can see, God has answered that prayer. Steve's mother kept praying for him. But it must have been a rough early life, Steve. You tell the story of running into an elementary teacher and telling them that you were studying ministry, only to have the teacher hug you and in tears say, "I thought you'd be dead. Thank God." Like many pastors' kids, Steve felt a strong pull to follow in his father's footsteps. So when the time came, he took up a bachelor's in theology at Mountain View College in the Philippines. And he just had one semester to go when he decided that the calling to ministry was not for him after all. Because just as being in a pastoral family can be a blessing and be inspiring, it can also be discouraging at times. And so he quit his theological studies and transitioned to business instead. Steve remained in the church though, and still felt a strong call to ministry. He kept on getting involved with ministry wherever he went. At the Adventist International Institute of Advanced Studies, he grew a youth group from 5 people to over 100 and started getting told that he should be in ministry. He considered it, but then he kept seeing some of the fallout and the political events from Burma that affected his father's ministry. And again, growing disillusioned with the church, he stepped to an alternate path and studied education and finished a Master's of Education in the Philippines as well. You didn't know he was so well educated, did you? He really is. Unable to return to Burma, of course, they moved next to Indonesia, where he helped with the men's prayer group. He still felt a call to ministry, but he couldn't seem able to get away from that calling. He worked in business for several years and was successful, but one day when he was taking stock, he realised something. That while living in a pastoral family meant there wasn't a lot of money around, he thought money must be the solution to the problems that he had. So he worked hard, but when money came, he looked around and noticed that the people with a lot of money weren't any happier. They were equally unhappy. And this was a low point for you, Steve. And it was at this point I believe you turned back to the Bible and finally saw that your father's life made sense and you understood it. Then there was a move to Malaysia, and Steve, you worked in humanitarian work with the UN, and while in Malaysia, Steve's family decided to do one more thing for him, one final duty. They needed to get him a wife. He had known Lumnu for a while, and I have to say, I might be in trouble for this, but when he knew her to be a serious student and spiritually mature. In fact, he thought of her as the Ellen White of college. And in contrast, Steve called himself the silly, funny one of college. And he wondered how they would ever get together. But Steve's mother came to his room and told him the whole family was going to find him a wife. And when Lumnu's name was suggested, he didn't know what she would think of him being so silly and funny. But when they telephoned and started talking, they fell in love. They were happy, and so were their families. Steve and Lumnu were married in Malaysia, then moved to Australia in 2011, and they found the fledgling Burmese community here at Ringwood Church. The Burmese group was really just starting, and Steve worked for the Migrant Information Centre for 8 years as a project and settlement support worker in Box Hill. But he also worked as a lay pastoral worker here in Ringwood from 2015 to 2019. Ministry kept calling, and Steve told me that while he was working in the social sector, he kept on slipping into Bible studies with his clients. He realised that that's where his heart was, really, with God. And it was during that time that it became obvious that the Burmese people in Ringwood needed someone to support them. He'd been challenged by Pastor Dennis Hankinson to help them. And Steve had promised God to never say no to what God asked him to do. The next pastor, Pastor James Greensill, challenged him to preach. And before he knew it, Steve had a preaching ministry. All the signs were pointing to a calling from God. But still, the decision to enter ministry is a difficult one. They just bought a house in Montrose and they wanted to move there. But Pastor Dennis Hankinson and Pastor Brian Lawty challenged him to do ministry. And so in 2017, they decided they should make a final decision. And Steve and Lumnu prayed and they asked God for a sign, not expecting that God would or could possibly answer in such a beautiful way, because against all odds, Ruth was conceived as an answer to that prayer, and their child was born. This was a miracle and a sign from God for them, and they decided that Steve would finish his studies, and if they were called into ministry, they would go without looking back. And of course, we called you into ministry. Well, God called you into ministry. And you did an internship in Victoria here in 2021 in the same church that you love so much. And now looking back, Steve says he can see God's clear calling through his life. He says it still surprises him that God called him. It's clear now, though, that God has called you, Steve. And he says he's not fighting it anymore. Steve is no longer a reluctant pastor, but very happy to serve God. And Steve, we are very happy to have you serving here in Victoria, and we're excited to see how God will work through you in the years to come.